We had been camping deep in the woods near Timber Ridge, far from any town, down a long dirt path with no other people around. No rangers, no fellow campers, just endless trees stretching in every direction. First, it was ideal. My wife, my brother-in-law, and I, along with our 3 nephews, ages 4, 7, and 9, spent our days hiking, fishing, playing games, and gazing up at the stars. Our dogs roamed freely, enjoying the wide open space. But everything shifted on the second evening. Around 6 p.m., our usually energetic and curious dogs became tense. Their fur stood on end as they paced along the perimeter of our campsite, staring into the dense forest. Now and then, one of them let out a low, warning growl. We figured they must have caught the scent of a bear or a cougar. This was deep wilderness, after all. We weren't too concerned. That night, after the kids had gone to bed, the adults sat around the fire, enjoying the quiet. But something felt off. The air was thick and unnervingly still. I've been camping my whole life, and I know the normal sounds of the forest at night. The rustle of small creatures, the occasional hoot of an owl. But that night, the woods were eerily silent. Worse still, I couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that we were being watched. It wasn't paranoia. It was that deep, primal instinct. The one that tells you when unseen eyes are locked onto you. When we finally turned in, I could barely sleep. Every time I started to doze off, a sound, a faint crack of a branch, the shuffle of leaves, would jolt me awake. I kept telling myself it was just an animal, but something in my gut said otherwise. The next morning, we discovered 2 of our 5-gallon water jugs were completely empty. They hadn't been knocked over or spilled, just drained. The kids could have been playing with them, or maybe there was a slow leak, but I had a bad feeling. As the day went on, the tension in the air grew heavier. Even the boys, usually full of energy, were quieter. The dogs were restless, sniffing frantically and darting ahead on the trails as if searching for something unseen. By midday, we decided we'd leave the next morning. We weren't panicking, just uneasy. Something felt wrong. The woods felt different. And by the time night fell, we realized we had waited too long. By the time we were packed, the sun was beginning to dip behind the trees. The boys begged for one last adventure before we left, a snipe hunt. We agreed, figuring we had about an hour of daylight left. It was meant to be a harmless joke. I trailed behind the group, tossing a rock into the bushes now and then to keep the kids entertained, making them believe a snipe was nearby. We had only gone a few minutes from camp when a large rock, the size of 2 fists, suddenly came hurtling out of the trees. It barely missed one of my nephews. We spun around, expecting to see an animal, but the forest was empty. Then another rock struck me square in the back. My brother-in-law and my wife stared at me, waiting for me to admit I had thrown it. I hadn't. Then I saw it. Something moved in the shadows, not an animal, not a person, something else. A shape too tall, too thin, standing completely still, watching us. I grabbed my nephew's hand. Time to go. Now. We didn't run, we walked quickly and silently. But behind us, the woods stirred. Branches cracked. Leaves rustled. Something was moving, following us, keeping pace just beyond the tree line. Then suddenly, it charged. We grabbed the kids and bolted for the cars. Behind us, the bushes shook violently. Many somethings were there, but we didn't stop to look. We tore out of there, dust kicking up behind our tires. As we sped away, the tension still clung to us. We kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see that figure standing at the tree line, watching us leave. And then we saw them, the bones. They started appearing along the dirt road. At first, a skull here, a rib cage there. But soon there were dozens, rotting carcasses, stripped bones. The remains of deer, raccoons, rabbits, some fresh, others old. The stench of decay filled the air. We swerved around the more recent ones, trying not to run over them. Then we saw it. A faded, rusted-out school bus, abandoned in a small clearing. I don't know why, but I stopped. Maybe I thought someone might be staying there and needed a warning. I stepped out of the truck. The bus was in ruins. Flat tires, windows covered in old newspapers. Strange symbols were scratched into the peeling paint. Nearby, a fire pit, at least 20 feet across, had been dug deep into the earth, and inside it, bones, too many to count, some bleached white, others still clinging to bits of flesh. Hanging from the surrounding trees were small animal carcasses, tied up with string. I felt something watching me. My stomach twisted. I turned back toward the truck, and my wife's wide, terrified eyes locked onto mine. Without a word, I jumped back into the vehicle. We caught up with my brother-in-law and drove the rest of the way in silence, never looking back. We don't know who or what was out there, and we don't want to know. All we know is that something was watching us from the trees. Even after all these years, I still get chills thinking about it. Every summer, my family used to spend a week at this secluded, peaceful place called Birch Lake. It wasn't a popular spot, just an old weathered cabin, a dock, and a lake stretching into dense, endless woods. No nearby houses, no other campers, just us and the wilderness. I used to love it there, like it was our own hidden retreat. But after that summer, I never wanted to go back. One morning, my sisters and I decided to float on the lake using some old rubber tubes. The air was thick with early morning mist, swirling over the water in ghostly shapes. From the dock, you could barely make out the opposite shore, just the dark silhouettes of trees looming through the fog. They had been out there for nearly an hour when suddenly they came sprinting back, crashing onto the shore, drenched and gasping for breath, their faces drained of color. Took them a while to even speak, and when they did, their words barely made sense. They told us they had seen something on the far bank. At first, they thought it was an animal, maybe a large dog, low to the ground, unmoving, watching them. But then it stood up, and it wasn't a dog. It was pale, almost an unnatural shade of white, and the way it moved, stiff, twitchy, like a puppet with tangled strings, was just wrong. It swayed, shifting side to side in an unsettling, jerky manner. Then, suddenly, it turned its head and stared straight at them. They said its eyes weren't glowing, weren't reflective, just deep, empty pits. And then, in a single unnatural motion, it dropped onto all fours and bolted into the forest. By the time they finished telling us, they were in a full panic. My dad, who never got shaken up by anything, just sat quietly, rubbing his jaw. Finally, he told them to stay put and not to go near the water for the rest of the day. He didn't say it outright, but I could tell he believed them. A few nights later, we tried to pretend everything was normal, but the tension was still there. Even the campfire didn't feel warm and inviting. By midnight, we had all crawled into the tent. The woods had gone eerily silent. No insects, no wind, just the distant sound of water gently hitting the shore. I don't know how long we laid there before we heard the footsteps. At first, they were soft, slow, somewhere out in the woods. Then they got closer, more deliberate, circling the tent. I barely breathed, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might explode. My dad, lying closest to the entrance, sat up slowly. And then silence. Total, suffocating silence. Then, just beyond the thin fabric of the tent, we heard a low growl. Not a dog, not a bear, something else. Something that didn't belong. My dad didn't hesitate. He grabbed his half-empty beer bottle and hurled it into the darkness. For a moment, nothing. Just the sound of glass shattering against the forest floor. And then something threw a piece of it back. I swear, something flung a jagged shard of broken glass straight at us. It sliced right through the tent and cut my sister's arm. She screamed, clutching her arm as blood ran down her skin. Then the footsteps started again. Faster this time. Running but not away. Around us. Circling. Over and over. We stayed huddled in the tent, frozen, too scared to move or speak. I stared at the ceiling, shaking, counting the hours until daylight. At first light, we packed up and left without a word. My dad just got behind the wheel and drove. As we pulled away, I looked back at the tree line, half expecting to see something standing there, watching us. But there was nothing. My sister still has the scar from where the glass cut her. A thin, jagged mark running down her forearm. People can say whatever they want, that it was just an animal, a trick of the fog, our imagination. But I know what I saw. I know what we heard. And I know that whatever was out there that night, it wasn't human. We weren't alone at Birch Lake. This happened to me during the lockdown. I found myself spending hours watching YouTube videos of people doing nothing but camping outdoors, admiring the scenery of the wilderness, from the mountains of Argentina to the vast forests of Canada. As my birthday approached, I decided it was time to leave the city and immerse myself in nature. I live in Loma, a city that has several nature parks one can visit. However, because of the lockdown, my choices were limited. Fortunately, I had some connections that allowed me to enter the Marimba National Park. I won't get into too much detail about how I got in because, well, let's just say I didn't exactly go through the official entrance. The last time I was there, I experienced something odd, maybe even supernatural, and I was curious to see if it would happen again. That's how 3 of my friends and I ended up going on a camping trip in the reserve to take a break from city life and breathe in fresh air. From the moment we arrived, I felt a little let down because it wouldn't stop raining. Even though we had prepared for the weather, we hadn't thought about how the fog mixed with the rain would limit our sight, making it nearly impossible to appreciate the landscape around us. As we spent the morning walking the trail, guided only by the path before us, I had a moment where I thought about how easy it would be to get lost out here. I won't lie, it made me a bit uneasy. At around 1 p.m., the sky finally cleared, revealing Marimba Lagoon before us, surrounded by breathtaking views. Anyone who's been there knows it's both stunning and mysterious, with patches of fog drifting across the water like they have a life of their own. Sunlight broke through the clouds, highlighting the rich variety of native plants. It was exactly the birthday gift I had hoped for. Then things got strange. As I looked more closely at the ground, I noticed something odd. It wasn't muddy at all, as if the heavy downpour we had just walked through had never happened. I glanced around, expecting to see puddles or damp earth, but instead, it was as dry as if it hadn't rained at all. I mentioned it to my friend standing nearby, and she shrugged, saying it was a common phenomenon. She claimed it happened near the Velaz airstrip too, which was supposedly why it was built there. I had never heard of that, but as long as frogs and lizards weren't about to start falling from the sky, I was happy to just enjoy myself. We spent the afternoon eating and chatting about the lockdown, the struggles of working remotely, family life, everything really. But deep down, I was waiting for someone to bring up what had happened to me the last time I was here. The faceless woman I had seen near the water. Sure enough, it was my friend with the airstrip theory who asked about it. She said, "This place is incredible, but I can't imagine a woman being out here in just a dress. It's freezing." I replied, "I know what I saw, believe me or not, but honestly, we're having a good time, and I don't feel like talking about it." For a few minutes, they made jokes, saying it was probably an abandoned mannequin or that maybe I was just seeing things because of exhaustion. In the end, we laughed it off, and I suggested we cut the cake since it was getting late. We sang happy birthday, and everything seemed fine, until we noticed the echo. At first, we thought it was just a natural echo, but then my knees went weak. It wasn't an echo at all. It was humming, as if someone was trying to recall the tune, pausing in strange places. I glanced around, trying to pinpoint where the sound was coming from, but it felt like it was right next to us, even though we couldn't see anyone. The realization sent a chill down my spine. Snapping out of my daze, I told my friends we should leave. Just then, one of them pointed toward the lagoon, and there she was, a woman in a black dress, standing at the water's edge. I didn't feel terror. It was more like seeing someone familiar, someone who had been away for a long time, or maybe it was as if I had been gone and was now returning. Only my friend and I could see her, but everyone could hear the humming, as if she were standing right there among us. That unsettled the group, so we quickly packed up our things and made our way back to Loma. On the way home, my friends were visibly shaken by what had happened, but my one male friend was especially pale and silent. When we finally dropped everyone off, I asked if he was okay, assuring him that, in my opinion, it wasn't a big deal, just a normal-looking woman. That's when he said, "No, normal women have feet. That thing didn't. They just weren't there. That really got to me, but we didn't talk about it again after that. There was a patch of woods near my... A buddy's old hangout sat hidden deep in the woods, tucked away like a forgotten relic. The remains of a crumbling structure stood there. Maybe a house, maybe something else. The walls, built of cracked and weathered stone, rose about waist-high, with no roof or ceiling, just the skeletal remains of whatever it once was. Vines twisted through the ruins, nature reclaiming the space. One evening, 4 of us decided to make it our own. We weren't just there to explore, we were going to build something. Armed with a hatchet, a machete, and a couple of pocket knives, we got to work like wilderness survivors, hacking at the brush and clearing the area. Near the ruins, there was a circular pit in the ground, half filled with bricks. Maybe an old well, maybe a storage hole, we had no clue. But as we worked, it started to feel like our place. By nightfall, we had a fire burning inside the walls, the glow flickering against the cracked stone. The scent of burning would fill the cool air as we sat around, laughing and talking, feeling like kings of our own little hideout. Then I had to take a dump. Not ideal, considering we were in the middle of the woods. But my friend's house was only a short walk away, 10 minutes at most. I'd made the trip plenty of times, so I wasn't too concerned. I grabbed a flashlight and headed off alone, the firelight fading behind me. Halfway there, I heard footsteps. Not the scurrying of an animal, not the distant snapping of twigs, footsteps. I stopped. The sound stopped. A cold weight settled in my chest. I took a few cautious steps forward, and there it was again. Something or someone was walking when I walked, stopping when I stopped. My pulse pounded in my ears as my skin prickled. I turned back, my pace quickening, my flashlight trembling in my grip. The sight of the firelight in the distance was a relief. As soon as I stepped back inside the ruined walls, my friends looked up. Back already? I hesitated, my throat dry. I think someone's out there. They stared, waiting for the joke. Then we all heard it. A noise just outside the walls. A sharp, hollow clang, like metal striking stone, echoing through the night. Every hair on my body stood on end. No one moved. No one breathed. Then, all at once, we sprang into action. We doused the fire, smothering the flames in a rush. Darkness swallowed the ruins. Without a word, we slipped through a broken section of the wall, avoiding the main exit. We took the rougher, more tangled path through the undergrowth. It was faster. Branches clawed at our clothes as we shoved through, trying not to trip. Behind us, something moved. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, crunching twigs in the dark. We broke onto the road, hearts racing. Then we saw him. A figure emerged from the trees behind us. A man in a hooded sweatshirt. He stopped at the tree line, just watching. We didn't wait. We didn't speak. We just kept moving, never looking back. And we really, really hoped we'd never see that guy again. A friend shared this story with me. I don't even know how to begin this, but I'm going to tell you about something that happened one night on a camping trip that I still can't explain. A few friends and I decided to head out into the wilderness. You know how we love finding those secluded places where no one else is around. We're the kind of people who enjoy nature. We pitched our tents, started a fire, and relaxed, sharing stories, laughing, and soaking in the peaceful surroundings. The plan was simple: unwind, watch the stars, and maybe catch a glimpse of some wildlife if we were lucky. Everything was perfect. You could hear the chirping of insects, the crackling of the flames, the gentle rustling of the trees. It was the ideal camping atmosphere until suddenly we all heard it. A scream. It was honestly the most unnerving scream I've ever heard. It sounded like a woman, but something about it was wrong, almost distorted, unnatural. It wasn't a mountain lion. I'm sure of that. We all froze, staring at each other. No one wanted to admit they were scared, but you could see it in everyone's face. Then came the footsteps. They were heavy, like they belonged to a large animal, but something about the rhythm was strange. It was as if whatever was moving had a limp or just didn't walk normally. One of my friends made a nervous joke about it probably being a bear, but even he didn't sound convinced. We all huddled a little closer to the fire, trying to reassure ourselves it was nothing. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us. I grabbed my flashlight and scanned the trees. At first, there was nothing, just moving shadows and branches swaying with the wind. But then I saw it. Tail. Long, thin, and covered in filthy, matted fur. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I kept the beam steady, and that's when I saw more of it. Something moving through the trees. I couldn't make out its full shape, but I caught a glimpse of a leg, or something similar to a leg. It didn't look fully animal-like, though. It was more like a distorted human leg, twisted and unnatural. We all fell silent. The thing edged closer to our campsite, and that's when I realized it wasn't making any noise, except for its breathing. A deep, raspy inhale and exhale, almost like a quiet growl but slow and steady. None of us dared to move. We just sat there, gripping whatever we could use for protection. Felt like forever, but it was probably only a few minutes. The thing paced back and forth just outside the reach of the firelight, like it was searching for something. Then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, it was gone. 1 second it was there, and the next it wasn't. As soon as the first light of dawn broke, we packed up as fast as we could. Before leaving, I checked the ground where it had been pacing, and that's when I saw the tracks. Deep claw marks, huge like those of a large beast. But right beside them were prints that almost looked human. Almost. They were misshapen, like someone had tried to form a human foot but got it horribly wrong. Since that night, I haven't been able to get that scream out of my head. I've spent hours comparing it to known animal calls, mountain lions, wolves, even birds, but it wasn't any of them. Even now, when I'm alone at home at night, sometimes I think I hear it faintly in the distance. I don't know what we encountered that night, and honestly, I don't want to know. All I do know is that none of us slept, and every time I think about it, I still feel that same cold fear. Mountains, a place that feels like a scene lifted straight from an old myth. Towering peaks loomed ahead, dense woodlands swallowed what little light remained, and the air carried the weight of an untouched land. It was breathtaking, but in that eerie, unsettling way that made you feel like unseen eyes were always watching. We set up camp near a small stream, a seemingly ideal spot except for one thing. The ground was absolutely covered in cow dung. It was everywhere, but in the Balkans, that wasn't anything strange. Locals often let their cattle roam up into the highlands for grazing during the warmer months, so we brushed it off. We cooked, chatted, and eventually drifted into an uneasy sleep beneath a cold sky littered with stars. Then morning arrived. I woke to the distant sound of hooves striking the earth. At first, the rhythm was steady, almost soothing, but then came the low, guttural bellows, deep, throaty sounds that sent a chill creeping up my spine. By the time I unzipped my tent, I saw them. A massive herd of cattle had gathered around our camp, their dark, empty eyes fixed on us. And among them he stood, a monstrous white bull. His body was solid muscle, his hide stretched taut like something sculpted from stone. Steam rose from his nostrils as he exhaled in short, sharp bursts, his ears twitching, his gaze unwavering. At first, he simply watched, but there was something off about the way he stood, too still, too focused. We moved cautiously, not wanting to startle him, but it was obvious he didn't want us there. His ears flattened. He stomped the ground once, twice, and then, without warning, he charged. He crashed into one of the tents, flattening it instantly. Metal poles snapped like twigs, and the person inside barely managed to roll out in time, scrambling away as the bull turned and struck again, dragging the wreckage several feet before flinging it aside like it weighed nothing. We shouted, waved our arms, did everything we could to scare him off, but he didn't even flinch. He paced, snorting, his unblinking stare locking onto us with something that felt wrong. This wasn't mindless aggression. It was something else, a challenge. And so the waiting began. For 4 excruciating hours, we were trapped, barely daring to move, as the beast stood his ground. If we so much as shifted the wrong way, his head would lower, muscles tensing like a coiled spring, ready to strike again. We couldn't fight him, we couldn't outrun him, and we sure as hell weren't about to provoke him. At last, as the sun climbed higher, the herd began to wander off, and with them the bull. But even as he left, he kept looking back, slowly, deliberately, like he was daring us to follow. We packed up in silence and left without a word. That night, huddled around a different campfire miles away, we laughed about it, trying to shake off the lingering dread. But none of us slept well, because in the stillness of the mountains, when the wind shifts just right, I swear I can still hear his hooves in the dark. It was in 2019 when the world seemed to pause, and my family and I were stuck at home in Arizona, looking for anything to break the boredom. My parents suggested we camp out in the backyard for the night. Something different, something fun. I was all for it. Right up until dinner, we were fully set on sleeping outside. But at the last minute, my brother backed out, saying he wasn't feeling well. My parents took that as a sign, and just like that, our little adventure was over. We went to bed around 10:30 p.m., all of us tucked safely inside, unaware that choosing to stay indoors had just saved our lives. The spot we had picked for our tents was on the left side of our house, close to an odd part of the yard that lined up perfectly with an intersection. Sometimes, we'd hear cars speeding through the neighborhood late at night, but it was never anything more than an occasional nuisance, just background noise. Then, around midnight, that noise turned into something else. A sharp screech of tires shattered the silence, followed by the gut-wrenching sound of metal twisting, breaking, and something massive slamming with brutal force. It jolted me awake, my heart pounding as I tried to make sense of what I'd just heard. Half asleep, I brushed it off as some reckless driver losing control. But when my parents started yelling for my brother and me to come downstairs, I knew something was very wrong. Their voices weren't just urgent, they were terrified. I rushed down the stairs, my brother right behind me. When we reached the porch, my stomach dropped. Below us, the car had completely destroyed our fence. Not just dented it, but obliterated it. The front half of the vehicle sat right where we had planned to sleep just hours before. If we had followed through with our camping plans, we would have been lying in our sleeping bags when that car came plowing through. Then the driver switched on the car's interior light. For the first time, I saw him thin, scruffy, dark-haired, looking like he was in his mid-20s. There was something deeply unsettling about the way he moved, his head drooping slightly before jerking up, like he had just realized we were watching him. My parents spoke in careful, controlled voices, calling down to him from the porch, trying to get information without setting him off. My dad quietly told my brother and me to stay silent. We obeyed, but I could feel my brother trembling beside me. For a few moments, the man ignored them, staring straight ahead as if he wasn't fully present. Then, suddenly, he stumbled out of the car and started moving toward us. His steps were uneven, but there was a sense of purpose behind them, something raw and unpredictable. He was muttering, slurring words we couldn't make out, but as he got closer, his voice grew louder, more erratic. I gripped the porch railing, my pulse hammering in my ears. My mom whispered something to my dad, and I could hear the fear barely contained in her voice. Just as the man reached the bottom of the porch steps, red and blue lights flashed across the yard. A police car pulled up fast, the doors swinging open as two officers stepped out, quickly assessing the situation. One officer cut the man off before he could get any closer, sitting him down and trying to talk to him, while the other moved toward the wrecked car, shining a flashlight inside. Then he stopped. He called something out to his partner, and both officers stiffened. The man in the car was too intoxicated to notice, or maybe he just didn't care. He kept rambling nonsense where he sat. It wasn't until the next morning that I found out the full truth. My parents sat me down and told me that when the officer had searched the car, he had found a loaded firearm. Had things played out differently, had the man seen us as a threat, had he been just a little more unstable, I don't even want to think about what could have happened. But the worst part? realizing that if my brother hadn't spoken up, if we had gone through with our camping plans, we wouldn't have stood a chance. We would have been lying there, wrapped in our sleeping bags, chatting and laughing, completely unaware of the headlights speeding toward us at over 90 miles an hour. Little human bundles, about to be wiped out by a drunk driver. We wouldn't have had time to react, to move, to do anything at all. Whenever I think about it, a deep chill still runs down my spine. It happened on an ordinary weekday. My friend and his team, a group of devoted researchers, had organized a trip to a wooded area not far from town. Though technically within city limits, the forest remained secluded and untouched. Towering trees stretched high, their dense canopies blocking out most of the sky, while the sound of birds echoed through the crisp air. It seemed like the perfect day for an outing, peaceful and safe, with occasional joggers, bikers, and hikers passing through. Their mission was straightforward: gather samples, document plant life, and collect data for their study. They had everything they needed: cameras, laptops, field journals, and sampling tools. As they followed a lesser-used path, the atmosphere felt calm. Sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting moving patterns on the ground. Their conversations were lighthearted, their laughter blending with the rustling foliage. But comfort can be deceiving. It lulls people into thinking nothing can go wrong. It began subtly, a faint movement among the trees, a quiet presence lingering just out of sight. Then, two men stepped onto the trail. They didn't seem dangerous at first. No masks, no frantic energy. Just two ordinary-looking guys walking without any real direction. But then, one of them reached into his coat and pulled out a gun, and everything changed. "Give us everything," the man barked, his voice sharp and laced with menace. No tricks, no pretending, just raw intimidation. The researchers froze. Their months of effort, their expensive gear, none of it mattered now. One by one, they complied, hands shaking as they surrendered their belongings. Cameras, laptops, phones, and wallets. Then one of my friend's colleagues, a young woman, suddenly had a panic attack. Her breathing turned erratic, her fingers clawing at nothing, tears spilling down her cheeks. But the attackers didn't care. If anything, her distress only seemed to fuel their aggression. The worst part? The forest wasn't empty. Other people were there: joggers, cyclists, hikers. Some saw, some hesitated for a brief moment before silently turning away, choosing not to get involved. No one came to help. The robbery lasted only minutes, but fear stretched time into something unbearable. And then, just as quickly as they arrived, the men vanished into the trees, leaving behind nothing but silence and an aching emptiness where their belongings used to be. For a long moment, no one spoke. They just stood there, dazed, their breaths ragged, their bodies heavy with shock. Eventually, they gathered what little they had left. Thankfully, the thieves hadn't taken the car keys. The walk back to the parking lot felt unreal, like stepping out of one world and into another, one where everything had shifted. Back in town, they went straight to the authorities. But even as they filed the report, they knew the truth. Their stolen gear was gone, and the chances of getting justice were close to zero. What haunted them wasn't just the loss of their equipment. It was the helplessness, the realization of how quickly safety could crumble. That forest, once a place of curiosity and discovery, now carried an invisible scar, a chilling reminder that danger doesn't come with warnings. It simply steps out of the shadows, and when it does, no one is there to stop it. Once, there was a group of campers staying at a site across from ours. They looked to be in their late 20s and were drinking late into the night. Normally, that wouldn't be a problem at a park like this, but one guy, an obnoxious, completely wasted fool, had this habit. Every time he took a shot, he would let out this loud, gut-wrenching scream. It wasn't a normal drunk yell or a happy cheer. It was something wild, a high-pitched, blood-curdling screech that cut through the quiet of the woods. And he wouldn't stop. By 2 a.m., the patience of the entire campground had worn thin. Finally, Someone rolled up in a small utility vehicle, probably a park ranger, and told them to shut it down. His friends, who were clearly over his nonsense by that point, were practically begging him. "Dude, stop drinking. No more shots, man. For the love of everything, stop screaming." It actually went quiet for a bit. Maybe 10 or 15 minutes of blissful, eerie silence. Then, from inside my tent, I saw headlights cutting across the fabric and heard a car engine start. I figured someone had finally taken charge and was hauling his drunk self home before he ruined the entire weekend for everybody. Just as I was drifting off to sleep, I saw the flash, even with my eyes closed. A massive, blinding blue-white explosion lit up the inside of my tent, as if lightning had struck right on top of us. A split second later, the sound hit, a deep, earth-shaking boom. Did a bomb just go off? My brain wondered. Then I remembered the power substation. Just down the road, there was a substation and someone very stupid had just crashed straight into it. I didn't need to see it to know exactly who it was. The entire campground fell into stunned silence. No more laughter, no more screaming. Just a long, breathless pause as people climbed out of their tents and campers, trying to process what had just happened. I'd like to say I felt bad for the guy, but honestly, he had done that awful scream at least 15 times after 1 a.m. Maybe the universe had just hit the mute button. I never did find out what happened to him. It was a bright, warm day in Maplewood, just right for a hike. When we returned to our campsite, we noticed a vehicle struggling to back in a brand new compact camper. Not exactly unusual. I've had my fair share of trouble parking one, too. The last thing I'd want in that situation is a group of strangers offering helpful advice, so we left them to it. 45 minutes later, everything had changed. I took the dog for a short walk, and as I neared that section of the campground, I saw flashing lights, a cluster of onlookers and emergency vehicles. Police, fire trucks. Something terrible had happened. I wasn't the type to gawk, so I turned around. That's when another camper, a woman I didn't know, approached me. "Did you hear about what happened?" she asked. Before I could answer, she launched into the story. It had been the family's first outing with their new camper, 3 generations together. A grandmother, a mother, and a young girl, all looking forward to a fun weekend. But the site they'd chosen had a steep drop-off leading to a lower level. That's where they made a critical mistake. They unhitched the camper on the slope without turning it sideways to the incline. Even worse, they forgot to secure the wheels. Gravity took over in an instant. The small trailer jerked backward, picking up speed fast. In a panic, the grandmother tried to stop it, but a heavy trailer doesn't yield to a person. It slammed into her, knocking her down like she weighed nothing, dragging her along as it careened downhill. The trailer didn't stop until it crashed into the trees below, but by then, the damage was done. By the time first responders arrived, the grandmother was in serious condition. I later learned she had multiple fractures and internal injuries. They stabilized her at a nearby hospital, but she had to be airlifted to a major trauma center. When the scene cleared, I walked back through. The campsite was taped off, 2 park rangers standing by their vehicles, keeping watch over what remained. Days later, the camper still sat there, wedged between the trees like a silent wreck. Let this be a lesson: always secure your wheels. It was the middle of October when my 3 friends and I decided to go on a weekend camping trip in a secluded area of Lassen National Forest. We had been planning it for weeks. Cool weather, vibrant autumn leaves, and a break from cell service. The plan was straightforward. Hike about 10 miles in, set up camp by a lake, and hike back the next day. Simple enough, or so we thought. Less than an hour into the hike, we encountered a man on the trail. He appeared to be in his mid-30s, wearing worn-out hiking boots, faded jeans, and carrying a small backpack. He initially seemed friendly, asking if we were headed to the waterfalls, a place we had heard of but hadn't planned to visit since it wasn't on our route. When we said no, he enthusiastically told us that we should reconsider. He had just been there, he claimed, and the best way to reach it was via an unmarked path about half a mile ahead. "You can't miss it," he assured us. "Way better than the main trail." We thanked him and continued walking, but something about him unsettled me. Even after we said goodbye, he lingered, watching us. My friend Jess muttered that he gave off a strange vibe, and we laughed it off. But I noticed she kept glancing over her shoulder. When we reached the narrow dirt path the man had mentioned, it was barely visible, weaving into the thick trees. My gut told me to stick to our original plan, but curiosity won out. The man had sounded so certain, and we were eager to see the falls. At first, the hike was manageable, but soon, the terrain became steeper and more rugged. After about 20 minutes, something dawned on me. The trail didn't look like it had been used in a long time. No footprints, no signs of recent activity. That's when we spotted a small pile of rocks stacked neatly in the center of the path. It looked freshly arranged. Ben joked that it felt like something out of a horror movie, but nobody laughed. The mood had shifted. Suddenly felt like we were being watched. When the trail narrowed even more and disappeared into thick brush, Jess was the first to say we should turn around. None of us argued. We started retracing our steps when we spotted another stack of rocks, identical to the first, but we hadn't passed it before. Someone had placed it there while we were hiking. A shiver ran through me, and my heart pounded. We quickened our pace. Ben pulled out his phone to check GPS, but there was no signal. Then we heard it, a sharp crack, like a branch snapping close by. We froze. "Probably just an animal," Jess whispered. That's when we saw him, the man from earlier. He was standing at the edge of the clearing, partially obscured by a tree. This time, he wasn't smiling. Ben called out, trying to sound casual, "Hey man, we're just heading back to the main trail." The man didn't respond. He just watched us. Then, two more figures emerged from behind the trees. Both were holding large knives. "Drop your bags," the first man commanded. His voice was flat, emotionless. My stomach twisted. None of us moved. We were too shocked. One of the other men stepped closer, waving his blade. "We don't want to hurt you," he said. "Just leave your packs and go back." Ben whispered, "Run." Without hesitation, I let go of my backpack and bolted. I had never run so fast in my life. Branches tore at my face, but I didn't care. Behind me, I could hear yelling, footsteps crashing through the brush. At one point, I felt a hand graze my jacket, but I yanked away and kept running. By some miracle, we made it back to the main trail. We didn't stop running until we reached the parking lot. The only vehicles there were ours and a battered pickup truck with no license plates. We didn't wait around. We threw ourselves into my car, locked the doors, and sped off. We reported it to the local authorities, but they never followed up with us. To this day, I wonder what would have happened if we hadn't turned around when we did. If there's one thing I learned, it's this: always download your maps before heading out, never take unmarked trails, and most importantly, don't trust strangers. I reside in a secluded area, far from the bustling city, where the land stretches endlessly, mostly open fields. Around 15 minutes from my home, there's a vast meadow with 2 lakes. Beyond the water stands an abandoned estate, a place shrouded in mystery and eerie tales. Rumors have swirled for years about odd happenings there. Some claim to have seen shadowy figures wandering near or slipping inside the decaying structure. We never paid much attention to the rumors until 2 years ago, when 2 of my friends and I decided to camp out there overnight. We wanted to see for ourselves if there was any truth to the eerie stories. After planning everything, we agreed to meet at the meadow's entrance at 7 p.m. At the start of our hike, we were in high spirits, joking and laughing about the possibilities of what we might experience. The idea of exploring the abandoned estate felt exciting and full of adventure. But as we trekked further, and the sun dipped lower, the mood shifted. The once lively landscape grew unnervingly silent, and the only sound that accompanied us was the crunching of dry autumn leaves beneath our feet. The playful banter faded, and the closer we got, the more uncertain we became about continuing. After all, the estate wasn't just abandoned, it was in ruins. Charred, crumbling walls stood as remnants of a past fire, with strange, unsettling symbols spray-painted all over them. The structure loomed in isolation, standing desolate in the middle of nowhere. By the time we finally neared the estate, night had fully settled in, casting an unnatural stillness over everything. That's when we noticed it. At first, it looked like a person standing about 200 meters away. The dim lighting made it difficult to make out details, but something about its presence felt deeply unsettling. The instant we laid eyes on it, the figure moved, only it didn't move in any way that made sense. It covered the distance between us far too fast for any human. We stood frozen, paralyzed by confusion and fear, trying to process what we had just witnessed. Then one of my friends turned ghostly pale. His expression twisted in sheer horror as he let out a blood-curdling scream, telling us to run. His voice carried an urgency and terror that sent a chill down my spine. I instinctively glanced behind us, and my stomach dropped. Standing there was something tall, humanoid, towering at least 6'3" or more. But it wasn't just its towering height that was terrifying. It was the unnatural speed at which it had moved. We hadn't heard any footsteps, no rustling of the grass or leaves, nothing to indicate it had approached us so quickly. Without another thought, we bolted. We ran as fast as we could, driven by sheer panic. My friends were ahead of me. One was an athlete, effortlessly sprinting, while the other, shorter and slightly heavier, struggled to keep pace. As for me, I have a heart condition that makes running difficult, and my legs felt like they might give out at any moment. My struggling friend and I exchanged desperate glances, both silently thinking the same thing. This might be it for us. But something primal took over. The sheer terror of what was behind us pushed us beyond our limits. Fueled by the will to survive, we ran harder than we ever had before. The journey that had taken us 30 minutes to walk was now a mad sprint that barely lasted half that time. We didn't dare look back, too afraid of what might be closing in on us. But as we reached the lakes, we risked a glance over our shoulders, and what we saw will haunt us forever. The figure had stopped near a small dam. Then, right before our eyes, its shape twisted and contorted, shifting from a tall, humanoid form into something that dropped onto 4 legs. Without hesitation, the creature darted into the darkness, vanishing before we could process what we had just seen. By the time we reached the first houses of the residential area, we were a mess, panting, crying, and completely shaken. A security guard rushed to us, alarmed by our state. He could see the terror written on our faces, though we were too disoriented to explain anything clearly. Even so, he could tell that something truly terrifying had happened. He guided us to a nearby house, where we tried to collect ourselves, but the fear lingered long after that night. In the days that followed, an unshakable feeling of being watched clung to us. It was as if whatever we encountered hadn't truly left us alone. Even now, the memory of that night sends chills down my spine. Some mysteries, in my opinion, are best left unsolved.